Oh, it's a happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to my show where it really is okay to not be okay. I'm Rae Bonney, a qualified counsellor, workplace mental health specialist, and not to mention a very dedicated and enthusiastically disruptive men's issues advocate. It's very rare, but I do dare. As always, I'm unwrapping one of the greatest gifts going around, and that is people. Layer by layer, we explore the thoughts, experiences, achievements and challenges of ordinary people bound to inspire the best you, at the same time acknowledging that it really is okay to not be okay. Now, it's the first week of February, kids are back at school and many others have kicked off the official work year and wondering what is ahead for us in 2018. But one thing we can be certain of is change. Change surrounds us, it's within us, and it exists as an eternal possibility, lurking in places where too often people are not prepared for the repercussions. And way too often this can have devastating effects on the human condition, and many people who've been travelling perhaps a smooth road all of a sudden are thrown into turmoil. And it's often difficult to identify in others when life has taken a turn, and even trickier to know how to help support them. Many of you will have heard me ask that question: what does it feel like being you today? I'm going to repeat that. What does it feel like being you today? Now let's park that question and rewind for a moment. Now, late last year, in October, I had the amazing privilege of addressing the Ulverston Rotary Club at their annual dinner in our beautiful state of Tasmania on behalf of Beyond Blue in my role of their ambassador. And what a beautiful part of the world, and an amazing community full of people who really care about each other. And thanks to Ulverston Rotarian Lindsay Morgan, I was no exclusion and felt quite the princess for the entire weekend. The gala dinner was spectacular. It was a great event with speakers like Tasmanian sweetheart and former Senator Jackie Lambie. You will have heard on the news just previously that we're looking into a bit more about this dual citizenship. Anyway, I don't have a word for that. We had Deputy Premier Jeremy Rockliff and Shane Broad. Now, Shane is a Labor member for Braddon. And it was in his speech which really took my breath away and further endorsed the power of asking somebody that question: what does it feel like being you today? I have him right here on the line with me at the moment. Good afternoon, Shane.
Good afternoon, Rae. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm glad all of our technicalities worked out and we actually do have you here with us.
Yeah, technology's great.
It is. Tell me, what's it like are you in Ulverston actually in Tasmania at the moment?
No, I'm actually in Launceston today. I've just, which is about an hour and a half drive from Ulverston, from where I live.
Oh,
I've been talking to some stakeholders in one of my portfolio areas, which is agriculture.
Because we should actually be referring to you as Dr. Shane, shouldn't we?
No need to be that formal, I imagine. But yeah, no, I've got a degree and a doctorate in agriculture science. Yeah, that's right.
Not to be confused with Dr. Harry.
No. Like if you're sick, I can only really help you if you're a potato. So, yeah.
Or broccoli, I understand as well.
Broccoli, that's
yes,
right. Yeah.
Yes, I have done my research, Shane. Now, let's go back to October last year, because we'd not met each other, but we did hold hands at the Ulverston Rotary Gala evening, which is to raise awareness and money for Beyond Blue going towards research to mental health.
Yeah, and it's always a fantastic event. The Rotary Club of Ulverston West and especially Lindsay Morgan do a fantastic job. And another thing about it is it's one of the events that my wife and I both regularly go to. So we've got 3 young kids. So what are they now? 9, 6 and 4. So we're at the stage now where, babysitters and nights out are reasonably rare, but we always make a point of trying to get to the Beyond Blue dinner together.
Well, it's certainly an event worth going to, and I felt very privileged to be selected as the keynote speaker last year in very good company. And, arriving there and listening to, Jackie spoke and Jeremy Rockliff spoke also, but it was, listening to you and the story that you told that really gave me tingles up and down my spine, and then, later listening to you sort of recall, what I spoke about and how those two things really came into play together.
Yeah, and there's always really good speakers. You are definitely one of the highlights. But, I mean, on that evening, Jackie Lambie spoke very candidly about her own issues with
Yes.
mental health and her own struggles.
And little did she
Jeremy-
know what was ahead of her as well, because that was before, before she had to take leave of her very important position as well.
Exactly, yeah. And then Jeremy Rockcliffe talked about his time as a Lifeline counsellor, which he highlights quite regularly in different fora. So, and it's always a great evening, and it's money. It's not only raising awareness, but it's raising money for a good cause. So,
Yes,
yeah.
well, do you know, I was actually speaking with the beautiful Lindsay Morgan only this morning, and he was saying, people are still talking about the event, but most importantly, they're talking about the messages. And, you never know when a life is changed, and you never know, where your message resonates. And nor do we need to know either, do we, Shane?
Yeah, that's right. I think the thing that I've really gotten out of the different speakers over the few times that I've been, so I think I've probably been to 4. It's just that first of all that mental ill health is something that you should talk about. It's not something to be hidden anymore. But over various times, I've always gotten something of value out of those talks. So, for example, some people who come and have had very high-flying careers, and you think, well, these people have everything, and then you find that they're basically on the edge of a crisis the whole time. And then they talk about their recoveries. But the thing that I've found very interesting is how they also talk about, well, actually, I had a relapse 6 months ago. Or so this thing that it's a constant battle for some people. Some people it's something that they can get over, that they can learn the appropriate tools to keep their issues under control. Whereas others, it is a constant battle.
Yes.
And of course, the thing that I got out of your speech was just that, asking that question, what does it feel like being you today?
And we are going to get into that in a little bit more detail. But I just want to go back to something you just said about, people who, you look at the iceberg analogy, what you see at the tip, you've got no idea what's going on for somebody underneath. And we see these apparently very successful, high-flying people who talk about their experience and then recovery. So why do you think people like that, Shane, can't talk about their experience whilst they're experiencing it? Do you think that stigma plays a big role, and fear of loss of self and loss of integrity come to play?
It has been, and this has been a carryover from the past. But I think we're getting better at dealing with it. We're getting better at being open, getting better at admitting that we do have problems and that not everything is rosy. And that's part of it. I think it's being led by people like the AFL, for example, and AFL teams where players, when they find that they're not coping, can actually take the time out that they need. And people are being very open about it. It's something that is discussed, because you don't have to go very far to find people who have significant mental health issues, with whether that be depression, anxiety, or anything else.
Yeah, but when you talk about the AFL, and this is no disrespect, because I know players in the AFL who have come out and retired because of how they're feeling, but, AFL players are fairly well supported in their exit, by the media or by the AFL Players Association, whatever. But your normal average Joe who, has a job to sustain, is it as easy for those kinds of people to come out and disclose what's going on for them?
You're definitely right. But I think when you have higher profile people admitting that they have mental health issues, then it trickles down from the top. It becomes more and more acceptable. And I think that's what we're seeing over time, is it is becoming more acceptable to discuss when you're not feeling very well.
Yes.
Just the same as when you've got the flu. It's okay to say, look, I'm not feeling very well today. I think it gets led from the top. It's far from ideal, you're right. But when we start having a conversation and it becomes discussed more and more regularly, because this is something that's common,
yes,
that it destigmatises it. And leading from the top is one way that can happen. And it's happened in politics too, people openly admitting that they've had issues.
Oh, we see, Robert Doyle, resigning overnight.
Exactly. And others.
Yes.
So I think that we need to have an open discussion about it.
Yeah, but, talking to Lindsay Morgan this morning, again, I love talking to Lindsay every single time. And, this very small speck of the earth, Ulverston, in a very small speck called Tasmania, in the 10 years that the Ulverston Rotary Club have been organising this Beyond Blue, awareness gala event, along with a wellbeing event attached to it. Lindsay was saying that, the way that people talk on the streets about how they're feeling, and I was there and I know what it feels like as well. And you talk about coming from the top, Shane, but we're not really recognising how many people are working at the grassroots with very little funding, very little support, but really making a difference to people, like actually touching people and making the change instead of, investing billions of dollars into, air quotes, research that necessarily doesn't touch anybody.
Yeah, and I think that those community-based grassroots type movements and people like Lindsay can make a huge difference.
Now, I understand that you almost got on the back of a bucking bull on Saturday night. Is that right?
Oh, not really, no. No, we went to the Ulverston Rodeo, yeah. So,
muster for mental health, I understand.
Oh, well, it was certainly run by the Rotary Club of Ulverston West.
Yep. So, so the money raised from that event, the Muster for Mental Health, raises money for the Australian Rotary Health, which is, a great organisation, which, does go into a lot of research. But again, it's just, another thing that goes on in this very, very small space that is making difference, making change, raising awareness that doesn't necessarily come from the top.
Yeah, that's right. We need to take the many little hammers approach.
So. Yes. Or mini sledgehammers maybe, Shane.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Now, speaking about change, because we never know when it's coming, and, the most important thing is to know, how do we support ourselves when change happens? And that could be good, bad or indifferent, because back last April in 2017, you received a call from Rebecca White. Now, what did she tell you in that phone call?
I suppose we need to set the background a little bit. So,
you go for that.
I ran in both the 2010 and the 2014 state election, where basically the Labor Party went from government into opposition, and it was a pretty terrible time for the party, especially 2014. We got a 10 out of 10 thrashing, as former leader Brian Green used to describe it. So, so I didn't get elected in 2014, and then I'd had a sort of an up and down period in terms of work and so on, and I'd managed to get myself back into the university system, and I'd secured a 5-year contract with the university, which is quite rare, and I was looking forward to the next 5 years being all about research in technology and so on in agriculture, and also continuing to work in my role then as a councillor with the Central Coast Council in Tasmania. And that's what I thought my life was going to be for the next 5 years. And then out of the blue, one morning, getting the kids ready for school, I got a phone call from Rebecca White. So Rebecca White is a member of Parliament in Tasmania, and she was like, "G'day, Rebecca, how are you going?" We're sort of thinking, why is she calling me? And that was like, 7:45 in the morning, thinking this is really odd. Anyway, she used a bit of pleasantries about, how are you going, and all that sort of thing. And then she said, well, the Labor leader, Brian Green, had resigned, and that she informed me that she was now a leader. And I'm like, okay, that's really nice, congratulations. And then she said, Brian is leaving Parliament. That means there'll be a re-election, and we'd like you to contest.
Wow.
And my wife saw me on the phone, and she's like, what's going on here? Because she was thinking that politics as a career had ended for me, and to a large extent, my thinking had moved on. I was going to be, doing other things.
Yeah.
So in Tasmania, we have quite an unusual system where you have.
I just have to ask you there, Shane. Did she pour champagne on your cornflakes instead of milk that morning?
No, poured scorn, perhaps. She, when I told her about the phone call, the first thing that she said was no. Basically, so in Tasmania, when there's you don't have a by-election as such, you have a recount So because in Tasmania we have 5-member electorates in a system called Hare-Clark, what they basically do is you could imagine there's a bag of votes that elected somebody. They tip those votes up on a table and start counting to see who is the second candidate in that pile of votes.
Literally.
Well, metaphorically, I suppose,
Okay.
but that's the process.
Yeah.
And so it was up to me whether I contested or not. So my wife and I had long discussions, well into the night, for a good week, the pros and cons. So pretty much after the election in 2014, I didn't have much work for a period. Things were tight financially, and we'd only sort of got back on our feet and made decisions like, okay, I'm going to have a contract for 5 years, so I bought a new car, those sorts of things, and then all of a sudden it's all thrown up in the air, and here I am wondering whether, what I should do.
Yeah.
And we talked about it at length, and it sort of came down to, if I didn't do it, it'd be an opportunity I'd always regret.
Yeah.
And in the past I've had a bit of a history of taking opportunities when they arise, and it's led me to some wonderful opportunities.
I know that. I
yeah.
know. Can I segue a little bit into that? Because I know when you were in year 12, you were offered an exchange student program, which was supposed to be in Denmark.
Yeah.
And you ended up in a place called the Faroe Islands.
Exactly, yeah.
Now,
so that's a little 18 little islands halfway between Scotland and Iceland, and I suppose this idea of things just randomly happening to me. I suppose when I look back, it's happened a few times, because right up until probably 10 days before I was due to leave to go to, I thought, Denmark.
Yeah.
I've been reading up on Denmark. I've been looking at the language, and that sort of thing, getting myself ready. And then I remember I was at a friend's house, and I came home that night, and my dad, he had this huge atlas, this map open to Denmark, and he's going over it with a magnifying glass trying to find Faroe Islands. And I said, "Oh no, Dad, it's not there." And I flipped back a couple of pages and pointed out to it being halfway in the middle of the North Atlantic. And it's like, oh my God.
Somewhere between Norway and Iceland, if you've got any idea where that is, people.
Yeah. And but I had an amazing experience and continue to have an association with them. And in fact, I when I came home from that year's exchange, I made the effort and I learnt the local language, which is like a old Viking dialect spoken by 50,000 people.
Yeah.
I made some really good friends, and then I ended up a couple of years later going back and for a holiday, and ended up staying another year. Oh. So But interestingly enough, I would have thought that being able to speak fluent Faroese would be absolutely useless, but there was there's a big salmon industry in Tasmania, and we had a salmon symposium. And it turns out that the Faroe Islands has one of the best regulated salmon industries in the world. And I sat down at a forum dinner, and there was a Faroese guy on the left and another one on the right, and we were speaking Faroese, so I could find out exactly what was going on. And no one could understand.
Did you shock the socks off them when you just came out, because you're quite fluent?
Yeah, they were reasonably surprised. But what was even better was they had some inkling that I was there.
Yes.
So the guy on my left, my best friend worked with him, and then the guy on my right, my best friend's wife worked with him. So it's a small world, and we had a great time. And it's sort of one of those things where I don't get the opportunity to speak Faroese very often, and kicking my brain into gear certainly. It took the cogs there, but it was a great experience.
Look, it's a fantastic story, and I think it just again further underscores when change happens. Look, that could have gone the other way for you, Shane. Being a young man at the time, and schlepping off across the other side of the world to a place where you don't speak the same language, and culturally it's worlds apart. It could have had quite a different impact on you.
That's right, but there were very difficult times during that exchange.
Yes.
The isolation, the missing home. You go through some pretty distinct phases when you're an exchange student. They warn you about it before you get on the plane, but experiencing it is something different.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot out of it. A lot about myself, I became way more confident than what I was, and I learnt about other cultures. I learned about other people. So on that exchange, there was a guy from Thailand, a girl from Bolivia, and a girl from Latvia.
Mm.
So, and just seeing the way that people interacted with them. So my Thai friend, whose name was Pom Pisanu Pom Sivopolop, I always like saying that, he, people, they always wanted to talk to him about, Bangkok and prostitutes and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
They wanted to talk to Ilse. She was from Bolivia. They wanted to talk to her about the cocaine trade and so on. No, sorry, that was Claudia was from Bolivia.
Yeah.
And then Ilse was from Latvia. And it was this was 92, so this was just post-collapse of the Soviet Union.
Mm.
And they wanted to talk to her about communism and all this sort of stuff. And then with me, they wanted to talk about beaches and beer. And it's sort of so chalk and cheese.
And do you know anyone I know somebody in Sydney. Do you know them?
Oh no, I get that all the time.
Yeah.
And well, after I'd been there for a long period, so after sort of halfway through the second year that I was there, people, because they start seeing you around a bit, they think you're actually a local, and because I ended up not having an accent or anything, and it's not as if many people can speak the language that aren't from the Faroe. So they'd say, "Who's your dad?" And I'd say, "Ian Broad," and they'd go, "Oh, okay, who's your mother?" And then I'd tell them my mother's Nola Broad. And they go, "Well, hang on a minute. How'd you get here?" What? It really confused them because they were thinking that I either had one parent. I'd have to have had at least one parent from the Faroes.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing a strapping Aussie bloke like you to drop the accent. But, needless to say, it's a perfect example that, you're certainly a man who has experienced change and your resilience. You've obviously got some very inherent resilience there to be able to do that, which makes you perfect for politics, I guess. But going back to where we were, Shane, at the early part of our conversation and talking about that question, what does it feel like being you today? And the remarkable story that you told during your speech at the Ulverston Rotary Gala dinner, coupled with mine, which made that very powerful delivery during Tasmanian Parliament not long ago. So I wanted to play that actually for our listeners today, just to get an idea of the possibilities around when we're facing somebody who we clearly see isn't feeling great or is acting unusually. There's a better way to go around it, and sometimes just asking that question can be it. So Shane, if you don't mind holding on the line, we'll be right back after we take a listen to you in Parliament. Here we go.
Excellent.
It's a fantastic event. I've been to a number of these before I was elected, and that was the Beyond Blue dinner that was put on by the Rotary Club of Ulverston West, and it was held at a fantastic venue in Ulverston, which is Pier 01. It was a fantastic event. It taught me. I always find that these Beyond Blue dinners, there's something to get out of each of them. But also, just from on a personal basis, it was the first event that I'd attended together with my wife. So we had a bit of a date night, which was great. So we had my parents looking after the kids, and we managed to get out together and have a bit of a date night. But the serious matters of the evening, a fantastic event, and people like Lindsay, who organised it on behalf of the Rotary Club of Ulverston West, should be congratulated for the effort that they put into it. The main speaker this time round was Rae Bonney, and she's a Beyond Blue ambassador. Came over from Melbourne to have a chat, and she was a very interesting speaker, very passionate about the issue of mental health. But one thing that I really got out of it was about a different approach to talking to people when you notice changes. So if you notice changes in your friends and people who you think may be having difficulties with their mental health, asking, "Oh, how you going?" will only get you a fairly short response. It'll be, "Yeah, right." Especially with men. She talked a lot about the approach to tackling mental health with men, how men typically brush it off, "Yeah, I'm okay." And the way that she talked about it was there's probably a better way of asking that question, and I suppose there's been a bit of a focus in the past on, "Are you okay?" And that's another good way of doing it. But she put it another way. She said, If you notice a change in somebody, perhaps you should ask, what is it like being you today? And she gave a number of examples of when she did notice changes in people, and she asked that question, what is it like being you today? And that elicited a different response, because when you ask a question like that, there's no, oh yeah, I'm okay. It's sort of, because you're asking it in a different way, it triggers a different response, and sometimes gives you an answer which can lead to help. And people like Beyond Blue and Lifeline are there for assistance as well as support from your family and friends. And I suppose from a personal level, this really brought back something that happened to me in the past. When my wife and I moved back to the North West Coast in 2005, so I'd been away for 9 years, and moved back, and we rented a house in Forth. And I remember we used to walk our dog along the Pump House Road, which leads to where Taswater is in Forth. And we used to do this regularly. We had no kids at the time, we had a nice dog, and we used to go for nice walks. And I was walking along the road and got to where the fire station is, the community fire station there at Forth, so it's moved since then. And I remember seeing down on the river, there was a lady, and she was close to the water's edge. And I looked at her as I was walking past casually, and she turned to me and she had this look on her face, and I'll never forget it. But I've only reflected on this since, but we kept walking, and there was a car that was parked some distance away, and we're walking towards that car, and police went past, another ute went past, and a reasonably young man jumped out, and he saw the car, and he's looking around the car, and these people went looking. And my wife and I thought, well, something's going on here. More police were showing up. So we were, a kilometre or so down the road, and we decided to turn around and head home. So we didn't really understand what was going on. And as we were getting back towards Forth, we noticed that there were perhaps people looking for somebody. And as we went past, there was the woman, she wasn't there anymore. And there was a police officer on the Forth Bridge, and we went up to him and said, look, I don't know what's happening here, but if you're looking for somebody, look, I saw this lady down near the fire station, towards the water. And the policeman sort of, brushed me off a little bit, and we went home. And we only found out later that this woman was missing. And lo and behold, a few days later, they searched the area that I'd pointed out and found the lady's body, unfortunately. And I suppose the talk for Rae Bonney on the weekend reminded me of that incident, and how if I'd only known that there was something wrong. I mean, it struck me as that's odd, that's really odd, but maybe if I'd done something, it would have been a different outcome. So it reminded me of that, but also if you see changes in people, don't say how you're going, ask what is it like being you today.
Well, there's no better question to ask. What does it feel like being you today? Welcome back. The time is just 35 minutes past 12 and you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC with Rae Bonney and Tasmanian Parliamentarian Shane Broad. He's the member for Braddon in our Apple Isle. Is it still known as that, Shane?
Oh, in some circles, I think, yeah. We tried to call it the Holiday Isle for a while, but I'm not sure what our tagline is now, but yeah.
Well, look, that was, every time I listen to that and that story about the lady, it just never fails to, make me feel inspired to keep going with this question. What does it feel like being you today? You can't say it enough, really, can you?
That's right, and the other thing is that the look on that lady's face.
Yes.
If I see anything even remotely coming close to that, that'll be the question I'll ask, because you just never know.
No.
You just never know. And it's always, you can cast your mind back to the past, but it's learning those lessons for the future. That's what
and it doesn't always have to be a person who's at, the end of their tether either. It can, what that kind of question can do for somebody's day just to make it better, brighter, and more impactful. In fact, do you know how that question came about?
I think you did talk about it, but I can't recall exactly.
I may not have, because it's a reasonably long story, but I can abridge it just for our listeners. Now, I I disclose quite openly on my show that I live with chronic depression and anxiety, but because I work in the space and I work in a helping profession and also in a guidance capacity, quite often people will not ask me how I'm feeling or expect that I might not be okay. And I was travelling to a place called Griffith a few years ago with work to speak about mental health to a group of gas guys out in the field. And I was getting on the plane and there was a lady and a man and they had two little kids and the kids were acting up quite a bit. And me being me, it was only an hour's flight, and said, hey, let the kids sit next to me. You guys have a chill out the back and, I'll take care of them. The answer was no. Went, oh, okay. Thought about my iceberg analogy. It's not about me. And then we got on the plane and the lady was actually sitting next to me with one of the kids, and the kid was still getting quite amped up. And the mother took a iPad out of her bag and gave it to the child, and we go, oh my God, I've forgotten headphones. So I had some headphones and I passed them to the lady and she snatched them from me and didn't say thank you or anything, but I thought that's not about me either. And then finally we were airborne and the seatbelt light went on or off, whatever it does. And she turned to me and she said, how are you today? And I said, oh, really good, thanks. How are you? And she said, oh, really good. She said, sorry about that, but my son, he's only 6 and he's got Tourette's, borderline personality disorder, ADHD. What this kid didn't have wasn't even in the DSM. And I said, wow, what is that like? And she said, well, we know parents that have children that are even even more disadvantaged than our children, so we feel pretty grateful. And she said to me, do you know much about mental health? And I took that opportunity, Shane, to say, not much. And then she looked at me and I said to her, but I do live with depression and anxiety. And she said to me, what does that feel like, being you? And she didn't put today on the end, but it was the first time in my entire life that anyone had ever asked me what it felt like, rather than what is it, what do you do about it, how do you treat it, and when are you going to recover from it? And it was one of the most significant moments of my life when, number one, I was able to tell her about it and tell her what it felt like. And I'd never done that before with anyone. And for me to be able to see and experience and even make sense of myself was extremely powerful. I'll never forget the moment. And, it was only really an hour and a half in my life that I spent with this lady. And she will never know the impact that she had on me either. But, I'm eternally grateful. That's the story.
Yeah, and that's another lesson from life too, is that you do not know the impact that you're having.
Mm.
But I'm sure that there are other people who've listened to talks that you've done as well that have gone away and it's changed their approach. And I see that happening all the time. And it happens where people come and say, that time that you did something. So I'll give you an example. It's not really to do with mental health, but I went to my daughter I took her to a birthday party, and a lady there whose son was my daughter's age, went to the same class, and anyway, she came up to me and she said, thank you so much for what you did, and I'm like, well, what?
What?
And yeah, well, I didn't say it like that. I was like, no worries. And what had actually happened was, I was at a show, and she was there with her son, who was a baby, and she was trying to take a selfie or something like that, and so I just said, oh no, just give me the camera, I'll take the photo for you.
Mm.
And then I took a photo, and that's the best photo that she has of her and her son as a baby. And it took me 30 seconds.
Oh.
And yet, years later, she remembered that I was the one who took the photo, and she was forever grateful. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
So the whole idea that you can have, even with such a small thing, it can have a big impact, because that photo really encapsulated that period of time when her son was growing up. So, yeah, there you go. And that happens in all walks of life. I think that you're wandering around thinking that you're isolated, but every little thing that you do can have an impact.
Yes.
So a little act of kindness.
Yes, and,
or a
and, sh- and
message
shouldn't
of hope.
assume that it has to be a grand gesture either. And even at the early part of the show today, recognising that, it doesn't matter where you sit socioeconomically, doesn't matter where you sit in the world in terms of privilege or not. This kind of stuff, it doesn't discriminate, and
Yeah,
it's not fair to expect that it does, and that people can perhaps sometimes afford better care, I expect. But
yeah.
I think generally in my experience, and I have the privilege of speaking to sometimes thousands of people in a week, that it's people having each other's back, and the feeling of being cared for so far outweighs being told that you're cared for.
Yeah, I also remember that story you told at the Beyond Blue dinner about the man getting a coffee,
Yes.
and the barista was nice to him, and that made the difference between, what could have been the end of his life to
Well,
being
that's right. Yeah.
a moment of hope.
Yeah. Two
Yeah,
two
so that-
smiles. Two smiles she gave him, and
Yeah.
he decided not to kill himself. So
Exactly.
it doesn't
Yeah,
get much more simple than that.
that's right.
And again, not that we have to always go to the nth degree of catastrophe. It's, helping people flourish and helping people be the best version of them, it helps make the world go around, and it helps us be industrious, and it helps us give, have purpose to go out and do good things.
And I suppose in a position like mine, sort of up to politicians to lead in that regard too.
Well, that's right. And another segue out of that, Shane, you are smack bang in the middle of your third election or fourth?
Yeah, third.
Third.
Yeah. So we go to the polls March 3. So we've got 3 weeks, 5 days, is it, to go? Not that I'm
Not that you're
counting.
counting.
Yeah, so it's a very, very busy period of time, and there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you
busy.
coming on the show today, because you must be absolutely flat out holding babies and, what do you do? Well, what's your thing?
I think in general, for me, it's about talking to people.
Yeah.
It's about the one-on-one contact. People don't like politicians, but they like people.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah. So, and it's a very, because we have 5-member electorate and so on, it's a very personal campaign, because you need not only do you need people to vote for your party, but they also have to look down the Labor column. So there's 5 Labor candidates,
Yeah.
including myself. So people need to think, okay, I'm going to vote Labor, Liberal, Green, whatever. And then they need to look down that column and put a 1 next to your name for you to get elected. So it is a very personal style of campaigning,
Yeah.
where a personal vote is crucial to getting elected. So
Yeah. I mean, how many people do you think vote on a nice face?
Oh, well, some people do, there's no
Yeah.
doubt. Some people, look at every policy and make a really rational decision after, hours of thought.
Yeah.
And others just walk in on the day and their only effort or conscious thought is between getting the ballot and filling it out.
Yeah, but
So
that authenticity is so important, isn't it? And it's probably a little more difficult here, like in Melbourne, where we're a lot bigger and got a much larger population. But again, something Lindsay Morgan said to me this morning, and this isn't pumping up your tyres, Shane, this is the truth, that Lindsay said, Shane Broad, year after year will walk down the street and have a conversation with anyone that's absolutely authentic. It's not about politics, it's just about that he cares. And again, that goes back to the feeling of being cared for, that you're able to, well, you haven't lost that touch at all. And he also told me that, you're raised by amazing people who didn't have a lot of money, but it really invested in their children and, got you to university, got you halfway across the world to the islands as well.
Yeah, and I mean, with my parents, you certainly see that I've got 3 siblings and we've all done very different things, but we've all been successes in our own right. Yeah, but that's very kind of Lindsay.
Well, there's no crap about Lindsay either. It's not, if he didn't like you, I'm sure he'd be very open about that as well. So
it sort of gets
Yeah.
back to your motivations for wanting to be a politician as well. Like, I'd just like to make positive change. That's sort of what I'm in it for.
Yeah, but when you say you want to make positive change, what can you like distill that down a little bit further? Like, what is it really?
Well, I mean, and the other thing is maybe I haven't been tainted because I've only been in politics a year. Well, I've been a councillor at the local government level for probably 7 or 8 years before.
Yeah.
But there's different aspects to the job. So there's one aspect which is about developing policy and new ideas and what to fund and what to do. That's one aspect of it. There's the stuff that happens, the politics, which is being in Parliament and speaking and, trying gotchas and all that sort of business. And then the other aspect is the day-to-day helping people. So people come to the office and say, I've got this problem, and you try and help them. So there's those different aspects. And I really enjoy the policy side, and I enjoy the really helping people side. And the politicking is the unfortunate other aspect that I suppose puts people off politics. And takes the shine away from the two other aspects of helping people and developing policy.
Is it all necessary, Shane, that level of politics?
I'm afraid so. We don't live in an ideal world. So
don't we?
negative ads and bagging people out and arguing black is white and so on is the unfortunate way that politics has evolved, and it's evolved because for some people it makes them successful. But the good thing about our hair class system as well is that because you're selecting 5 candidates get elected from the one electorate, there's room for different types. So when you're in a single member electorate, you basically get dished up whoever a party serves. So your choices are limited.
What a way to acknowledge a person, dishing them up and serving them.
Well, I'm being a bit facetious. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in the background for people to get pre-selected and so on, whereas in Hair Clark that happens in the open because it's the public who determine who gets elected, not.
Yes.
So, for example, in a single-member electorate, if you want to vote Labor, Liberal or Green, this is your Labor, Liberal, Green or Independent candidate. It's just the one that you have to choose from.
Yes.
So for some people, they might like the party but not like the person, and but still vote that way. Whereas in Hair Clark, they can look down the list of the 5 and pick out who they like best. So that means that if there may be support for somebody who isn't a party animal and is backed by powerful vested interests and so on. There's room.
Well, look, just before we wrap up, some of the big tickets and focus for you guys is health and removal of poker machines. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, well, health's our number one focus. I think it's the biggest issue at the moment. There's some problems with our health system in Tasmania in terms of just poor outcomes. We've got high use of locums and things like that. We've got constant bed block in our hospitals where the hospital beds are full. That means that emergency department starts overflowing, and so we've got system issues, and we really need to change those things. And we've been talking, I think, constructively with policies that it's not just about dollar figures, but it's about dollar figures and a way to make things better. And also removal of poker machines from pubs and clubs, so only allowing them in casinos. So in the early 90s, they were only in the casinos in Tasmania, 2 casinos, one in Hobart, one in Launceston. Yeah. And in our wisdom, we decided that to put them in pubs and clubs, and that's led to a whole bunch of impacts of the community, and some communities are impacted quite hard. But this hasn't been a policy that we've driven by ourselves. Basically, whoever's in government in July this year has to make a decision about what the future of poker machines looks like, because we have to give 5 years' notice for any changes to the current deed that allows poker machines in pubs and clubs. Yep. And so this point in time means that it has become an election issue. Not that we've created the election issue, it's just because of the timing. And we came together as a group and we talked about the impact on businesses, the impact on the community, the impact on people's desire to use the machine. Yeah. And we came down on the community interest test and decided that we'd remove them from pubs and clubs. And for me, it's about the damage that it does to the communities. And I've been doing a lot of door knocking, and you don't have to go very far, and you hear some really sad stories about the impact of poker machines in terms of domestic violence, bankruptcies, all
suicide.
sorts of things. Suicides as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there are people who go down to a pub or a club, put in $20, win or lose, and go home happy. But the facts are that there's a significant amount of people who are addicted to these machines, and it creates no end of trouble.
Well, it's like people can go to the pub and have one drink instead of 100 as well. It's just, it's a similar thing, similar issue, social.
It is, yeah, but I suppose with alcohol, if you prohibited it, if you said no more alcohol, then we'd know there'd be a black market overnight.
Oh, well, didn't they try that one time in the American Constitution?
But, what we'll see, you wouldn't be smuggling poker machines across the border. But there's whole bunches of different viewpoints on this.
Yeah.
But we've had a huge campaign from the vested interest. So there's about 7 families who own the majority of the machines, and they make about $110 million a year.
Yeah.
So there's a huge wad of cash to defend, and they're defending it, which is their right.
Yes.
They've over-egged it a little bit on some of their discussions. So they had members of an RSL club in Glenorchy saying if they lost poker machines, Anzac Day would be cancelled and things. So,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. No. But they've over-egged that one. But
yeah,
I mean, I know the maths of these machines as well. They are. I don't really even see it as gambling. I think it's just a license to rip people off.
Yeah, you explained it to me yesterday, and because my immediate thing is, well, when you solve one problem, then it just converts to a new one. But then the way that you described, and I would love to have you back on the show after the election, Shane, to see what the wash-up was and see what it feels like being you on that particular day.
Yeah, see if I've still got a job.
You can come and have a job here at 3WBC. Stakes are high, wages even higher. So
well,
you'd have to move the family to Melbourne, though.
No, thanks for the offer. Yeah. Well, I almost did move to Melbourne at one stage. I was offered. I was down to the last 2 for what would have been a good position, but it didn't work out. So these are one of these sliding doors moments. We might have ended up in Melbourne. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you, Shane. As I said, good luck with the election, and would you come back on and talk about that afterwards, like back in April, March, wherever that is? Shane, if anyone has uncomfortable feelings around our conversation today, because we have talked about some pretty significant issues, you can phone Lifeline on 131114. The suicide callback service is 1300 659 467, or of course emergency services is 000. Now, if you want to hear the show again or share it with others, take a look at my YouTube channel. Simply type in Rae Bonney, that's RaeBonney presents, and you can also find me on podcast under the same name. Now, Shane, you have requested a special takeout song for today. Do you want to tell us about that? Yeah,
it's a song that reminds me of the period of time when we were deciding whether or not I should contest the recount. And I talked about earlier, I thought I knew exactly what my next 5 years looked like, and they obviously things have changed. So I really liked the Birds of Tokyo, and so this song, Plans, always resonates, especially the chorus. But we made plans, and obviously things changed. And when I hear this song, it always sort of reminds me of going through that process. And yeah.
Well, here it is. It's Birds of Tokyo and it's Plans. You've been listening to Rae Bonney, where it really is okay to not be okay. And remember, by extending some kindness and care, you could be saving a life. So take care, everyone. Speak to you later.